Today we're taking a look at all 32 NHL teams and selecting the player who we feel is the most likely to have a breakout season. And that's coming out next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, today is a video about breakout players. So we're going to go through all 32 teams. We're not going to go through this at a very extensive time here, so we're only going to talk about each player just a little bit, but each team would have at least one player that you would suspect would be in line for a breakout season. So normally, these are younger players that are not quite as established, or at least you think they haven't hit their full potential. So obviously, it could be a rookie, it could be somebody maybe in their first couple of years, you just really think that based on how they've played, based on where they're projected to go in the lineup this year, that it's likely going to be a situation where they could really accelerate and make a big improvement on their overall performance and their statistics. So that's kind of what we're looking at here. Don't really have any set criteria, except I think their performance will be much better, and except it's obviously a big improvement from what we've seen so far, and in line for like a career type season early on here. So like I said, we're not going to take all rookies. I know some people tend to select a lot of first year players for that. I do have a few guys that could be in that category, but mostly we're going to be into the second and third year where I think they're really ready to take off. So let's take a look here, and we'll go through each one. We're just going to go alphabetically in this video. We've done it in different ways before, but alphabetical for today it is. So first up, we've got the Anaheim Ducks, and my breakout player selection for the Ducks is youngster Trevor Zegras. Now, Zegras has had a limited amount of time with the NHL, but to me is one of the top prospects around the entire league and around the entire world. A real solid hockey player. Is going to be a big star, I believe, in Anaheim. And with what they have going on and a little bit of a rebuild there, I think he's going to be able to get a bigger role, more ice time this year, and really prove he's ready for full-time duty and really accelerate through with his production. So to me, this is a year we're really going to take notice of Trevor Zegras with the Anaheim Ducks. Now, next up, we've got the Arizona Coyotes. The Coyotes player that I'm selecting as a breakout candidate this year will be newly acquired defenseman Connor Timmins. Now, Timmins has been a great defensive prospect for the past few years with the Colorado Avalanche. Had more of an opportunity to play last year, but of course, the Avalanche and the Coyotes ended up making a fairly significant trade earlier this offseason where the Coyotes sent goaltender Darcy Kuemper to the Avs, and Timmins was the guy they had to give up to make that happen. So as much as they probably didn't want to do that, they needed a goalie, and it's just something that they absolutely had to do. So Connor Timmins is a solid right-shot defenseman. Should be able to put up some decent point totals. Given where everything's at with the Coyotes, he should be able to grab a pretty solid role for them. I mean, this team's had a massive amount of turnover. They're trying to hand it over to more younger players like him who can kind of take on a bigger role and grow with this franchise as they rebuild. So to me, Timmins should really be able to take notice this year in Arizona and break through this season. Next up, we get the Boston Bruins, and I'm going with forward Jack Studnicka. Now, I could have easily went with goalie Jeremy Swayman here as well, but to be honest, I think with Linus Ullmark in the picture, I think Swayman's playing time will be a little bit more limited. He's going to be more of a backup role, so as much as he'll likely have a real good year, I think that his breakout season is still going to be a little bit down the road, in my opinion, but he will be certainly noticeable in having an important role for the Bees this year. But I think with the number 2 center spot vacated by David Krejci, I know they're likely going to give all the opportunity to Charlie Coyle in the beginning, but I think by the end of the year, Studnicka should be able to move into this role and really show that he's a full-time NHL player and ready to contribute and really break through with some solid offensive numbers. Next up is the Buffalo Sabres, and I'm taking Casey Mittelstadt. Now, I know Mittelstadt might seem like a player who is bordering on being a draft bust, but you know what? He finally started to break through a little bit last year under head coach Don Granato, and I think he's going to be able to continue that and continue moving forward here. I mean, Granato's still the coach. Mittelstadt should be able to grab a bigger role, and he finally started to see some progress in his development, which we've been waiting for a few years now. So to me, with everything going on in Buffalo and all the roster changeover, we're likely going to see a Jack Eichel trade. His real potential to play a solid top 6 role is real this year, and I think he'll be able to seize it and really break through with a nice performance. Next up, we have the Calgary Flames, and I'm selecting Andrew Mangiapane. Now, some might say he's already broken through, and to a degree, that's true. But looking at this roster, to me, I could have went with a guy maybe like a Dylan Dubé or maybe a Valimaki on the back end, but I think Andrew Mangiapane still has another gear to find, and even though he did kind of break through before, I think we're going to see more of a breakthrough this season and have him take his goal totals up even another level. He was phenomenal for Canada at the World Championships, playing on the line with Connor Brown and Nick Paul a lot, especially near the championship game, helped them win a gold medal. And to me, we'll be going into training camp with a huge amount of confidence, and I think he's going to take his game up here even yet another level. Carolina Hurricanes, I'm selecting Marty Necas. Now, the Hurricanes have a few guys here you could go to. Necas has been a good player too, like Mangiapane, but I don't think he's hit his peak yet. He still has time and opportunity to grow his game, put up even more production here, and really show what he's capable of. So to me, Necas will continue to grab a bigger role in Carolina. Obviously, right now they still have to sign Andrei Svechnikov. If he misses any time or he's delayed getting started, that's going to create a hole in the lineup which he could take advantage of. But even if that's looked after, I still see Necas slowly kind of continuing to grow his role in Carolina and really push through even further this year. Chicago Blackhawks, we're taking Kirby Dach. This one should be easy. Dach is a guy who projects to be a top center iceman in this league. The former number 3 overall selection. Missed majority of the time last year due to injury. And I think at this point, the Hawks are ready to give him a solid top 6 role and let him play with some of the top players on the team. So I think it's inevitable that Kirby Dach, maybe even a challenge for Rookie of the Year this year, he's going to be a top player in Chicago and making a lot of noise around the NHL. Next up, we have the Colorado Avalanche, and I'm selecting young forward Alex Newhook. Now, Bowen Byram's another guy who very well could break out this year as well. It's kind of a toss-up to me between these two players, but I think Newhook will be able to get a bigger role and more ice time, given the changes they've had to make within that forward group. They are a little bit thinner than they were before with the changes they've made, so they should have more of an opportunity for him to grab more ice time, which will only help him continue to play more and really start to put up more of the offensive numbers that you know he's going to be doing and he's very, very capable of. Alex Newhook's a terrific hockey player, whereas if you look at the blue line, Bowen Byram, I think he'll play a decent amount and get some opportunity. I'm just not sure he's going to get as much of a regular role as Newhook would, so I think Newhook might be the guy that shines a little bit more this year. The Columbus Blue Jackets were taking young defenseman Jake Bean, who's basically been trapped in the minors and stuck in the Carolina Hurricanes AHL farm system far too long. Finally gets moved to Columbus, and he will be able to play more of a top 4 role right away. This guy's been NHL ready, in my opinion, for close to 2 years, and has had a limited amount of games to his belt here. So to me, this trade is going to do wonders for him. Like I said, but given where Columbus is at, where he can play, we're really going to notice him have an impact. I mean, he's not going to probably wow you with a ton of offensively, super stats or anything like that, but he will play a prominent role, log a lot of minutes for Columbus, and we will see how valuable he is to that team. Next up in the Dallas Stars organization, we're taking Yoel Kiviranta. Now, Dallas, I had a tough time selecting this one, but to me, he started to break out a couple years ago in the playoffs when they went to the finals. Last year, he kind of took a step back a little bit, but this year, I think he can really amp that up and go forward here yet again. Dallas is a team looking to bounce back after a disappointing season. They dealt with a lot of injuries last year, and things just did not go their way. Kiviranta playing like he did in the playoffs, if he can do that for a more longer stretch and put up some real solid numbers, would be an absolutely huge boost to this team and get them back in playoff contention. Next up, we have the Detroit Red Wings, and I'm taking former first-round pick Filip Zadina, who's kind of developed a little bit slower than some thought he might. I know there was a lot of debate when he dropped in the draft that year. Guys like Brady Tkachuk and Jesperi Kotkaniemi went higher than him, and Zadina fell down to Detroit, and they were quite happy to draft him. And I still think long-term, he projects to be a real nice player for them. But after having a lot of time split between the AHL and NHL, I think this will be the year that he sticks at the NHL level and really breaks through with a real solid performance for the Red Wings. Next up, we have the Edmonton Oilers, and I'm going to select newly acquired forward Warren Foegele. Now, Fogel's not your typical breakthrough player where he's a little bit older, but in Carolina, he was stuck more in a depth role. I think he'll get more of an opportunity in Edmonton to play a little bit higher in the lineup. He will be a good complementary piece, be able to play with some higher-end talent, and therefore is going to break through with a much more solid offensive season. Next up, we have the Florida Panthers. We're going to take young goaltender Spencer Knight, who in my opinion very well could steal the starting job from Sergei Bobrovsky and end up being one of the top starting goaltenders in the NHL this year. Likely challenge for the Calder Trophy. maybe even be in the Vezina Trophy conversation. You just never know how good he could be because he's got a real solid team in front of him. That Florida Panther team, to me, is going to be one of the top teams in the NHL this year, and I think that he's good enough on his own, but you get that in front of him, he's really going to break through, likely steal a lot of starts from Bobrovsky and really shine down in Sunrise. Next up, we have the Los Angeles Kings, and I'm taking Gabe Vilardi. Now, I know some might think Quinton Byfield is going to be, really shining this year, the number 2 overall pick from 2 drafts ago. But you know what? I'm not entirely convinced that Quinton Byfield is going to get a ton of NHL playing time this year. Not as of yet. It could happen, and a lot of that will be determined, I think, by the play and readiness of Gabe Vilardi. Now, Vilardi was drafted as well in the first round, not as high as Byfield, but with a ton of talent. But he's had nothing but injuries with his back. He's finally was healthy last year, had a more solid chance to play. The Kings have made some real nice adjustments, so I think Vilardi could be in a situation to play with some stronger players, which will help him as well. And I think we're going to see a big improvement in a real solid breakthrough year from him, which could, like I said, limit the amount of playing time and role that we see Quinton Byfield get as well. Hard to say what the Kings do, but certainly each of them, how they play, will impact the other. I think that's for sure. Next up, we have the Minnesota Wild, and I'm taking one of their top prospects here, Matthew Boldy. Now, there's a good chance Boldy and Marco Rossi both could make the roster for the upcoming season and get a lot of NHL playing time. But to me, I think Boldy just seems like maybe a little bit more NHL ready. I know Marco Rossi had a real tough year last year battling COVID. Really had a tough time with it, was out pretty well all year and really struggled hard to kind of get back to having full energy and be able to train and everything. So I can just see Rossi taking a little bit more time to really push himself forward, whereas Bolden to me is there and ready to take those steps right now. Next up, we have the Montreal Canadiens, and this one was easy. We're going with Cole Caufield, or should we call him Cole Caufield, who had a tremendous playoffs in the Montreal Canadiens run to the Stanley Cup Finals. He certainly proved he was NHL ready. We'll be able to grab a more regular role in the top 9 for Montreal. It's hard to say exactly where he plays, but there's a good chance he'll play with top center Nick Suzuki a fair bit, especially on the power play. Those two had instant chemistry. Should have a dynamic duo there for many years to come. And I expect Cole Caufield to be putting many, many pucks in the net this year and possibly even challenge for the top rookie in the NHL. Next up, we have the Nashville Predators, and I've selected newly acquired prospect center iceman Cody Glass, who's now been drafted for a few years, formerly played in the Western Hockey League. Had a real solid run at one point, but has battled some injuries and really has kind of stalled in his development here a little bit, partially due to the lack of opportunity, I feel, with the Vegas Golden Knights. So getting over to Nashville, where he should likely be able to get to play with some different players, maybe get a different role, different scenery, some different coaching. I think we'll see Cody Glass get more regular NHL time this year and finally break through and be that regular, everyday NHL player we thought he would be when he was drafted. Next up, we have the New Jersey Devils, and I'm taking the former first overall selection, Jack Hughes. Now, Jack Hughes certainly improved last year over year 1, but I think it's fair to say, and everybody should agree with this, that he has not come close to reaching his full potential yet. And even though last year was better than his first season, I think he's really going to break through this year. We saw the Devils make some nice additions to their roster. He's likely going to get a chance to play, even more with better players, which is going to only help him a little bit further and really accelerate his growth this year. So I think this is going to be a huge breakthrough season for Jack Hughes. Of course, his brother Luke was drafted to the Devils this past draft as well in 2021. Of course, he won't join him just yet. He is going to play college hockey for at least 1 year, maybe a little bit more, and we'll see what happens. But the Devils will be blessed here with 2 of the Hughes brothers in the not-too-distant future. Now, next up, we have the New York Islanders, and we're taking Ilya Sorokin, the Russian goaltender, who certainly got his feet wet in the NHL last year and looked real solid doing so. I do think this year, between he and Semyon Varlamov, I think we'll get a little bit more of a different split in games, given the fact that we have an 82-game schedule compared to 56. That's going to make a huge difference in the amount of playing time Sorokin gets, and is he's only going to continue to grow as a goaltender. Had phenomenal results in Russia for a number of years before making the jump to North America. So to me, he's more than ready to take on more of a 1A, 1B role instead of being more of a backup. We saw the fact that Barry Trotz was comfortable splitting time with them in the playoffs as well. So I think this is going to be a real breakthrough year for Sorokin as he really takes on a bigger role with that club. You could probably make an argument here that Oliver Wahlstrom could even step into more of a regular top 6 role and finally start putting some goals on the board like we thought he would as well. Over the past couple of years, he's certainly earned more of a chance, in my opinion. If the Islanders do not make a significant trade to acquire another top 6 forward, then that should indicate that he's going to get that first shot at seeing if he could be that guy for them and very well could shine as much or more as Sorokin this year. Next up, we have the New York Rangers, and I'm taking the former number 2 overall selection 2 years ago, Kaapo Kakko. Now, Kakko has had a pretty decent start to his NHL career, but it's certainly been a little bit slow. I mean, we saw in the first season, he and Jack Hughes both didn't have the greatest offensive results. But I think this Rangers team is going to be even better this year. We'll see where they slot him in the lineup, but I think him and Lafreniere are both going to take some big steps this coming season. And given the fact that he's got, going from year 2 to year 3 now, this is quite common where we see a major takeoff. So obviously having a new coach there will make a big difference with Gerard Gallant. Some new changes to the team, different roster a little bit, different strategy. And I think this is going to be the year that Kakko really breaks through. Next up, we have the Ottawa Senators, and we're taking in last year's top selection in the draft, Timmy Stutzle. Now, Stutzle played last year as a rookie and had a pretty solid year, but I don't think we can call that a breakthrough season. He had a good rookie season, didn't make it to the top 3 finalists for the Calder Trophy. I think he was like top 5 or 6 in rookie scoring, which is still, for what he did in Ottawa last year, I think he had a pretty impressive season. The kid looks very dynamic, is going to be a terrific hockey player. I have no doubts that way. But I think this year, having another full year in North America over an 82-game schedule, especially if he gets a chance to play a lot with guys like Brady Tkachuk like he did last year, off and on. I mean, obviously last year he kind of went in stretches. He played with Batherson for a while. They were kind of a duo. He played with Tkachuk for a while. Hard to say who exactly is going to be his center. But you know what? They have such a dynamic group of young players that all seem to work so well together in Ottawa that to me, this year, I think Stutzle is really going to break through and really take his stats up another level compared to what we saw last year. Next up, we have the Philadelphia Flyers, and I'm selecting Morgan Frost. Now, Frost is a player, again, drafted with a lot of potential, and is one of those guys that we all thought, at least I know I did, would have been a more regular NHL player at least a year ago, long before today. But at this point, he's still fighting for more of a regular opportunity with the Flyers organization. Obviously, they changed things up here a bit. They made some changes on the blue line and in the forward group, and I think this could be a season where he gets a little bit more of a chance. So Morgan Frost, to me, is a prime candidate for this. Now, if you look through their roster, though, they just don't have a ton of players that were really in this category that, based on what I was looking for. So I'm kind of hoping that Frost turns out to be this player and really puts up some decent numbers this year. Next up in Pittsburgh, we have Teddy Bluger, my selection. Bluger's a player who's really continuously developed the past couple of years, slowly taken on a bigger role, and to me is going to break through a little bit more this year. Again, with Pittsburgh, they have an older team. They have a lot of guys already pretty well established. Looking at some of the guys that are, still in the first couple of years of the career, there wasn't a lot jumping out here, but I think Bluger is going to break through a little bit further, take his game up yet another notch, and get maybe a slightly bigger role here with the team, or at least be more important. Not to say that we're going to see an explosion from this player, but I like what he's brought so far, and I think he can take things up here a little bit further. Next up, we have the San Jose Sharks, and I'm taking young forward Rudy Balcers. Now, Balcers was actually traded to the Ottawa Senators in the Erik Karlsson trade, and the Sharks were able to get him back on waivers after not making the roster in Ottawa on a full-time basis. They had to put him through waivers to send him back to the minors, and they lost him back to the San Jose Sharks. Now, clearly that was not their intent, but they have so many prospects there, they can't keep them all. They all can't play for the Sens in the organization, and it's a nice pickup for San Jose to get a player they were already quite familiar with. He's got himself a nice extension now, had a strong finish to last year after he ended up back in San Jose. And I think this year, I think he's going to be one of the few players kind of surprising and kind of outperforming his contract this year. So I do expect Balcers to break through with a solid year. Next up, we have the St. Louis Blues, and I'm selecting forward Jordan Kyrou. Now, Kyrou, you could say, again, to me, kind of like Andrew Mangiapane, kind of broke through last year, but I think he's going to take his game up here another notch. The Blues have gone through some changes. They have a little bit of a different mix here in the forward group, and I think Kyrou is going to get every opportunity to continue to play a big role for them and play with some real solid players. So last year's performance was the start, but this year is going to be the year that he really breaks through, takes it up a notch, and really puts his even more offensive stats up than last year. Next up, we have the Seattle Kraken, and the player I'm selecting from the Kraken to break through is former St. Louis Blue Vince Dunn, who should be able to grab a bigger role, get a more of a power play time, and get a little bit more of a top 4 role, hopefully with the Kraken. I mean, the Kraken have more than enough players. They still have some guys that can be moved because they have ample players here. We don't know what they're going to do exactly, but to me, Vince Dunn's a young player they just signed as an RFA after selecting him from St. Louis. And I think he just needed to get out of St. Louis to get a bigger role, more of an opportunity, and should really look like a solid, young, offensive, dynamic defenseman that he really is. Next up, we have the Tampa Bay Lightning, and I'm selecting Matthew Joseph. Now, Joseph, to me, was a player. The only reason he hasn't had a bigger role, more of a bigger role in the NHL here is the fact that they're so stacked in Tampa. But this is finally the time now, after back-to-back Stanley Cups, that they've had to shed some pieces. Their entire third line of Gaudreau, Coleman, and Gord is gone, and I think he will be part of the new look third line going forward, who can pitch in with some offense and play a solid two-way game as well. He's an extremely fast skater. The offense is there. He's a guy I seen play quite a bit in junior when he was with the St. John Sea Dogs. He's a terrific hockey player. Like I said, the only reason he hasn't broken through yet is because there's so much depth in Tampa, but he's proven his worth. He's got the opportunity, and to me, this is going to be the year for him with the roster changes that they've made. Next up, we have the Toronto Maple Leafs, and I'm selecting free agent signing Michael Bunting. Yes, Michael Bunting and not Nick Robertson. I know he's another popular choice by some people, but I'm not entirely convinced Robertson's going to have a huge role this year. He very well could, but to me, Bunting is a guy that they signed with the intent of giving every opportunity to play in the top 6. He had a real solid stretch last year with Arizona. He's very familiar with Kyle Dubas and Sheldon Keefe from their time in the Sioux in the OHL. And to me, he's going to get a chance to play with some real solid players. He's a good player himself, kind of flying under the radar in Arizona lately. But now that he's in Toronto, he's going to get the spotlight. You're going to see the offensive numbers coming from him. I expect him to maybe even have a shot to play with Matthews and Marner on the other side here on the wing. Next up in Vancouver, I'm taking Connor Garland, newly acquired from Arizona. And again, he's probably one of about 3 players on this list that some people were arguing with me that they've already kind of broken through here. But again, look what he did in Arizona. He did break through. But to me, he's going to continue breaking through. He has not hit his peak yet. Another guy I saw play a lot in junior. I know what he's capable of. And trust me, he's going to have a chance to play with way better players in Vancouver. Likely have a solid top 6, maybe top 9 role, depending where they slot him here. I think he's going to be a terrific winger for a guy like Bo Horvat. And they are going to have great chemistry. And I think Connor Garland is going to put up even more points and really make it look like his time in Arizona was just the beginning. I think he's going to take things up a whole other level and be a terrific real steal here for Vancouver. Next up, we have the Vegas Golden Knights, and we've selected defenseman Nicholas Hague. Now, this was a tough one, to be honest, because Vegas is an older team. They don't really have a lot of younger guys looking to break through in their first few years in the NHL. But Hague is a player, along with a guy like Zach Whitecloud, who's the only younger pieces here that they have on their roster, really, that they've had kind of developing the past few years. Hague's a guy that's taken on slowly more and more minutes and more of a role with Vegas. And I think this year, after a few years now, we're going to see a bigger acceleration in his play this season. Next up, we have the Washington Capitals. Now, the Capitals are in a situation where I'm going to be taking a rookie, Connor McMichael. I'm not sure how much playing time he's going to get this year. And basically, looking at the Caps roster, to me, it just made the most sense here that he could be a guy because they're tight against the cap. So he's got an entry-level deal. I think he's NHL ready. He really had a solid year last year in his development. And I think he could grab a bottom 6 role for Washington and slowly work his way up the lineup here. McMichael's a real mature player. Should jump to the NHL real quick here and adapt quickly, in my opinion. So, like I said, I didn't really see a ton of options for younger guys that could really fit this category, but he is the one guy in the roster that could be that wild card to help with some young secondary scoring. And lastly here we have the Winnipeg Jets, and I'm taking young defenseman Logan Stanley, who started the breakout last year in the playoffs and is only going to take things up another step further. He's a huge defenseman, loves to throw some physical hits, can pitch in a little bit on the offense as well. And to me, he's going to be a guy making a big name for himself in Winnipeg on a greatly improved blue line. They're going to be able to have a lot more confidence back there between the goaltending and the defense score after adding guys like Schmidt and Dillon. And Stanley's going to take things up another notch here as well. And I think will be a terrific, solid addition to this team here on a more full-time basis moving forward. So those are all my 32 selections for the breakthrough players for the 2021-22 NHL season. As I stated before, if you have some players you feel different than me, make sure you leave some comments down below so we can discuss further. If you're new to this channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.